Gina, is it okay if we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Riley.
Okay.
Appreciate
No
it.
problem. No problem. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight as we are really excited to be able to share with you an update on the Harlan Gray Street Mobility and Safety Improvements Project. And we're looking forward to discussing with you how we're going to be changing the design of the project from what was previously proposed at the last public meeting that was on March 11th. That's based on the input that we heard from you. So if you go to the next slide. I also wanted to welcome our council office that is here joining us tonight. So I'm just going to turn it over to Gina to say hi to you all and going to kick us off real quick.
All righty. Well, hello, everyone. I am Gina, and I am one of Councilman Sandoval's aides. And normally she would be doing this intro and doing a much better job than I, but she is having some technical difficulties. So I just want to thank you all for coming and participating and being engaged in your community. And a special thank you to Dottie for really opening up the space for the community and listening to the community and really taking to heart and doing the best they could to come to a place that I think everybody's going to be happy with, or at least can live with. And especially listening to the voices of the people that live 24/7 in this community. And I feel like the community was really heard. So just thank you to Dottie, and thank you for our wonderful Inspiration Point residents. We appreciate y'all. And I see the councilman join now. So darn it, she could have done that, but hopefully I didn't mess it up too bad.
No, you did a wonderful introduction.
Well, you did way better than me, G. You should do it all the time.
I'm never doing it again. Don't have any expectations, peeps. Thanks, Riley.
No problem. Thank you. And there was a wonderful introduction, so I appreciate it. So just a quick overview of what we'll talk about tonight. We'll provide you with a summary of what we heard from you at the March 11th meeting. And then we will also talk about how we're incorporating your feedback based on the feedback that we heard from the March 11th meeting. We'll try to keep our presentation really brief tonight so that we have lots of time for question and answers as well as discussion. And then we want to talk or discuss with you how we're going to be changing the project more to focus on intersection improvements, which was based on the feedback that you've given us. And we'll discuss and look for your input on that. And then we'll have additional time for more feedback and questions. So on the next slide, just a couple of reminders that we do want the presentation to be and the meeting to be interactive. So if you do have a question, there's a chat box in the bottom where you can chat with us, but we also have it enabled so that you can turn your camera on, or you should be able to mute or unmute yourself. So that way, if you want to be able to ask a question, you're able to do so. One additional feature is that you can also ask questions or be able to raise your hand. There's a feature that will allow you to raise your hand so that if you have a question that's burning and you want to be able to ask it, we'll make sure to pause so that way we can get to your questions. If you're using the chat feature, just a quick reminder to make sure to be respectful of your neighbors. When using the chat feature, you just want to make sure that the chat is respectful. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of what the street is that we're talking about tonight. We're looking at Harlan and Gray Street between West 52nd and West 49th. So that's kind of the project area. And this is just to remind us of what the street is that we're talking about. And what triggered us talking about Harlan and Gray Street is because the street is being repaved in some time during the summer. So I just want to recap what was presented at the March 11th meeting on the next slide. And then what we heard from you at that meeting. So we held a public meeting on March 11th to introduce a bike mobility project that was being coordinated with our repaving. And the intention of that meeting was to share a design concept as an idea, and then share ways that you could provide feedback to us through email, through the chat, as well as through the phone. And we did get a lot of feedback, and so we'll kind of talk about what that looked like in just a minute. And at that public meeting, there was a bike lane concept that was shown as an idea. And from that, we received a lot of input. Some of it was from verbal comments that we got during the meeting. Some of it was from chat, and then some was through email that we received over the past month. And so on the next slide, it captures what we heard. So we heard a lot of comments that were related to pedestrian safety. There was also a lot about how we can improve safety for all modes, so not just bicycles, but how can we make traveling on the street feel safer for everyone. And then there was a lot of just kind of general opposition to the bike lane design that we proposed and presented. And we'll talk about how we're going to change that in just a minute. And then also some concerns about wanting to keep parking on both sides, which we recognize. So those are kind of the top comments that we got. And then we also received quite a few comments about some challenging intersections. And so that's kind of the summary of what we heard. Some examples of the comments that we got were that the street's already working fine as a shared condition between the people that use it today, such as the bikes and pedestrians. I think there was even a comment that sometimes people riding horses go down the street because of the connection to the Clear Creek Trail. And we also got a lot of comments about improvements needed at intersections. Definitely some additional input about missing sidewalks between 49th and 51st. And there was another comment that we'll address later on tonight that was about the need for improving the crossing that's at 52nd and Gray Street. And then a lot of comments about how street parking that's on both sides of the street is utilized for visitor parking. And some other concerns about vehicles running stop signs at Clear Creek Trail, or sorry, Clear Creek and Gray Street at that intersection there. And then finally, there was some mention of the Clear Creek Trail Master Plan, which will be kind of filling in that gap in the trail in the future. So on the next slide, just to kind of summarize I would say the 4 or 5 main topics that we got were a lot of comments related to parking, improving the intersections and pedestrian safety. So you can see in the example there, this was one of the locations where we got quite a few comments on. Again, a lot of comments about trying to keep this as a shared roadway, just because of the number of people that use it and share it. And I think the comments were kind of that resonated a lot was that it's working fine as a shared condition today. And then finally, some comments about speed concerns. So what I want to share with you next is how we plan to address or how we're incorporating your feedback into the design. So because of the concerns that we got about the parking, we are updating the design to minimize or eliminate any impacts to parking. So what that means basically, rather than this being a bike lane, we're going to instead focus on improvements at the intersection. And so as a result of that, that would mean that parking will remain on both sides of the street, just as it does today. The other thing that we heard about was just coordinating with the trail, the Clear Creek Trail Master Plan. And so the city does support the long-term trail plan. And we are just knowing that the implementation of the trail plan could be, we don't know when that's actually going to be implemented. And so wanting to kind of focus on how can we improve the street in the near term and how can we improve some of the crossings so that way the street is improved in the near term for those trail improvements to happen in the longer term. And then kind of, as I mentioned before, there was definitely a preference that we heard from the community of wanting to keep the roadway shared between people driving and riding their bikes and walking as it is today. So we're again keeping it as a shared roadway as opposed to putting down a dedicated bike lane. And then some comments about pedestrians, the comments about pedestrian safety. We'll walk you through a little bit later on how we're going to make some improvements to safety at the intersections, and we'll want to hear from you your thoughts on those improvements. And then in terms of speeding, we're also looking at ways that we can reduce speeding on the street. One thing I also want to mention is the Clear Creek Trail Master Plan that was being coordinated so this is being coordinated through the Parks Department. So I apologize for not being in the loop on this particular plan during the last time. This particular plan is actually being coordinated through the Denver Parks Department, which is the agency that manages our trails in Denver. And it's being coordinated through Arvada, Adams County, and CDOT. And this plan is still in place and will be completed as redevelopment occurs, as well as through partnerships. And so that's kind of, as I mentioned before, because it's sort of dependent on that site redeveloping, we don't necessarily know the timeline on it, but it is still in place. And that's why, to kind of address the comments that we're getting in the near term about improving the safety on the street, we're looking into making some intersection improvements to kind of benefit the street in the near term. So I'm going to pause there for any kind of questions or discussion before we get into the next part of this. As a reminder, you're able to unmute yourself with the button, and then we also, if there's questions in the chat, we'll try to get to those.
Hi, this is Alicia Zimmerman, and I'm going to kind of moderate the chat here as we go during the Q&A. Riley, the first question we got from Ian may be cleared up later, but he says, are you you're not sharing if you're keeping parking. Pretty weak compromise, in my opinion. And so maybe you can address whether we're keeping parking or not. Maybe that'll answer it.
So we are keeping parking on both sides of the street, just based on the feedback that we got from the community during the last public meeting.
So Ian, feel free to ask another question if that wasn't an if that didn't answer the question you were actually asking. And everyone keep the questions coming in chat. I don't see any other ones right now. Oh, looks like one more came in. I don't see any others here. But also I see Bob has your hand raised. You are welcome to unmute yourself, Bob, if you're able to do that.
Yes, thank you. So for what I'm seeing, I missed the last meeting. I couldn't be there, but I've done quite a bit of emails and talking to my neighbors around here. I live right on Gray Street, 5165 Gray, right in the middle of the shared walkway that we're talking about. I'm so glad to see that people have reacted to our questions and our feedback. I think as you can see, I think the master plan is a solution. And in the meantime, I think the shared street is the way to go. I just haven't seen any problems with it. Thank you very much for your consideration.
No problem, and we appreciate your feedback on that.
Hey Riley, this is Garner and Ryan. Do you mind if we go ahead and ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. We live on Harlan. And just to confirm, it looks like no bike lanes are going in. Is that the current thinking, that bike lanes are pretty much a no-go at this stage?
That's the current thinking, and instead what we're kind of calling the street is, and the reason for that too is when we looked at our data, we showed that the volume of vehicles is actually pretty low. I think so. What instead we're looking to do is improve the street by making the intersections more safe, and so that's kind of what we're looking at right now.
Okay, and will you be sharing how specifically what the plans are to address speeding? Because we see that every day outside of our house on Harlan.
Yeah.
So yeah, pedestrian safety, that sort of thing.
Yeah, happy to. We'll address that in a couple of different slides. We'll kind of show you some of the things that we're kind of taking a look at in the near term, and just to make sure that we're addressing that, and then we'll happy to get some additional feedback afterwards of how we can continue to improve that. And Ryan, I just want to make sure that I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
And I see that there's at least one more comment in the chat. And I think that a lot of these will be answered in the next section of the presentation. So if nobody has any opposition, I think we can go through the next section and then answer the questions that are more specific to what's going in where and how exactly are you addressing, you know, each concern. So we can go
Yeah,
ahead
that sounds good.
and move forward. And then, but we do, Shane, we do see your comment in there, and we will certainly get to it first next time if it hasn't been answered.
And just to make sure, any other thoughts or questions before we move on? All right, I think we'll go to the next slide. So yeah, now we want to talk to you about what the proposed intersection improvements will look like or could look like, just kind of based on what's proposed so far. So as I mentioned before, a lot of the Inspiration Point neighborhood is actually on our schedule to be repaved in 2021. We actually try to repave the entire city. I think it's about every 8 to 10 years or so. And when we repave the streets, it's an opportunity because it refreshes the pavement. We have to go back out and redo the striping. So that's what you can see in my picture right there is one of our crews. They're adding in a marked crosswalk. So that's an opportunity to do some improvements at the intersections as a part of the repaving. And so that's one of the kind of why we're here and why we have this opportunity to talk about some improvements. The first one that I want to talk about is at Harlan and 50th. I know we heard a lot of comments about this particular intersection. One of the things that we're looking at doing, or at least is proposed, is adding a new marked crosswalk and what's called a stop bar. The purpose of that is to improve the visibility of pedestrians that are in the intersection, and it also alerts drivers where they are supposed to stop their car. And so sort of helps with being able to navigate the intersection a little bit better. And so these are things you probably see in a lot of other parts of the city, and something that as a part of the paving project, we would be happy to be able to add. And then another one, so Harlan and 51st, this is one, and I know there was a comment on this. So another thing that we're looking at doing is also adding new crosswalks as well as stop bars at this location as well. So Harlan and 51st, as you're all familiar with, is where the street also merges or intersects with the Clear Creek Trail. And we heard a lot of comments before about both from whether it be drivers not seeing the stop signs, or also about bikes that are blowing the stop signs and coming through. One of the things that we're hoping that that this would do by marking the crosswalks and adding stop bars is that it makes this more visible as an area that you're supposed to stop at. And then it'll also help to improve the visibility of pedestrians that are in the intersection. Another thing that you'll notice that's on the screen, and this is where that bottom box is pointing to, is we're looking at adding something that's called a curb extension. And the purpose of that is to sort of help with that corner right there, and to, that does a couple of things. One of them is to reduce the distance that a pedestrian has to cross. The other thing that it's supposed to do is it's supposed to tighten the roadway a little bit and make it a little bit more narrow. At that corner. What that does is it helps to reduce, these are shown to reduce speeds, as well as to kind of slow down vehicles that are making turns, so that if there's a pedestrian that's in the intersection, those pedestrians are more noticeable that way. So those are two kind of near-term improvements that can be proposed there. And the example on my screen is an example of what a curb extension looks like. I think I may have heard someone that may have had a comment. All right, maybe not. So this is an example on the screen of what a curb extension looks like. Again, that can be done with a repaving. And I know that there's also some comments about how do we get bikes to stop when they're coming off of the trail, and we can still discuss if there's any options with our parks department that manages the trails, just to see if there's anything that we can do from a signage perspective, or really making it clear again that you're supposed to stop right there.
Riley, I'm going to jump in because Shane's comment refers to this intersection here.
Yes.
And Shane says the main concern is about pedestrian safety and the fact that some people, even neighbors, don't stop, and they go speeding past this stop sign. It's a
Mhm.
blind corner too, and has almost seen, has seen some near misses. And so just kind of an added comment there, but I don't know if you have any response to that.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and that's exactly what this is intended to help address, is to just make that intersection more visible, and again show those stop bars that you see on the screen, which are the big rectangles, are just help kind of show drivers where they're supposed to stop. We are also talked about how there's a sign that's when you're coming, we'll kind of talk about this a little bit later, but there's a sign when you're going down the hill that reminds drivers that there's a stop sign. And we've talked about we may either add another sign at closer to the bottom of the hill just to remind drivers that there's once again that there's a stop sign there, or move it so that it's in a more visible location. So that's one of the things that we could do to address that.
Hey, thanks, Riley, for the answer. I appreciate it. This is Shane DeHanish, by the way.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah, and I was wondering if you guys have thought about maybe also those stop signs that blink,
Mhm.
that that you can put on the intersection there, because I feel that by painting some lines, and it's mainly the north and south, up and down Harlan, which it actually scares me. We have a couple of kids, and if one were to run ahead of us and not stop, it's a tough intersection to be around, because I see a lot of people speeding by at 40 or 50 miles an hour.
For sure.
Like some of those stripes wouldn't really deter them, along with that stop, the warning sign. There's a sign below. I don't think that has been as effective. So yeah, something maybe more eye-catching to catch people's attention, because I feel like I'm just waiting for something to happen, unfortunately.
That makes sense.
I don't like that, but it is what it is. So
yeah, that makes sense. And I hear where you're coming from. And that is something that I don't know if we've used those in Denver. I know we've certainly seen them all around the state that have those, like especially if you're driving on a state highway. I've seen those where it's the flashing warning that alerts people that there's a stop sign. That's something that I am happy to discuss with our city traffic engineer and ask if that's something that we can use in Denver, and follow up with the council office.
excellent. Thank you.
No problem. Bob, I see you had your hand up as well.
And sorry, Bob, you're still muted.
Oh.
Here, I'm gonna ask you to unmute, Bob. And there should be a box that comes up, that pops up. Okay, feel free to type it into, and we'll try and come back to you, okay?
Sounds good. Sorry about that. All right, so if we go to the next slide here, then we'll go to the next intersection. So the other thing that we're looking at doing where Harlan Gray and Clear Creek Drive all come together is the same thing, adding additional marked crosswalks, as well as the stop bar, again, just to show to help improve visibility at the intersection. And then we're also looking at adding a curb extension, so basically kind of expanding using paint and posts, expanding the median where it says Clear Creek Drive, as well as that corner that's in the right of the picture. What this would effectively do is it narrows that intersection a little bit so that it helps to sort of show drivers as well as people riding bikes where they should be at if they're making a turn. And it also is these kinds of treatments where you narrow the roadway have been shown to be effective at reducing speeds. So that's something that we're looking at doing there. So I just want to pause there in case there's any thoughts there or any questions.
I am unmuted now.
Great, okay.
Just a comment, I think the warning sign about a stop sign coming down the hill just before the first stop sign coming down the hill.
Okay.
I think that sign has been knocked over, but I'm sure that will be repaired.
Okay.
One other comment, I see a lot of people that they're not familiar with the trail. They come off of the path and they're looking for where do we go?
Right.
I'm hoping there's maybe some signage where the people that come off of the trail, bikes and so forth that come off of there, if they'll know to go ahead and take a left there and come on down the hill instead of crossing Gray Street right there. They tend to, they tend to think maybe Clear Creek Drive is a place to go. And they kind of mess around there in that intersection.
That's a great.
Go ahead.
Yeah. That's a great comment. We are going to address some of that with some signage. So, so definitely, and we'll share that in the next couple slides. Any other questions or thoughts here at this intersection? The other thing, so on 52nd and Gray, we're looking at doing additional marked crosswalks as well as a stop bar. And then this is this picture that you see in my screen. We're looking at putting in basically it's an activated crosswalk. So if you're a pedestrian and you want to cross here, you push a button and then lights will flash, which is what's shown in my screen. And then it alerts drivers to stop and allow pedestrians to cross. So the image that's shown in my screen on the right, that's an example of one of these that we recently installed. I forget the exact street, but it's in another location in Denver. And these have shown to be effective at getting vehicles to stop and allow pedestrians to safely cross. And so we're excited to propose one of these for this location. And we are trying to prioritize it so that we make sure that that there's a way for this to be installed either as a part of this paving project or right after. We definitely got quite a few comments on improving this just in the near term and being able to improve that crossing there for pedestrians and bikes.
Riley, can you explain if in the picture on the right, if the 52nd and Gray will have that kind of island in the middle as well, or if it'll be more on the outside?
Right, so the island that's in the middle, I don't know if that's currently, I don't think that that's currently proposed. Sometimes we'll use these, it depends on the how wide the street is or how many lanes there are on the street. I don't actually think that this would have an island in the middle of it just because it's a two-way street. If there was like a turn pocket or a turn lane here, we would sometimes use those, and that's what's called a pedestrian refuge island. I think for this one, it would just be the push button signal that you see.
And I think Rich can hop on too and correct if not, but I think that there are some curb extensions that could help as well. So it would be more on the outside of the roadway rather than in the middle. So, okay.
Great. Any other thoughts on or questions on this particular crossing right here? And if you can go back to the slide before, or actually I see Bob had his hand up again. Bob, did you have a question? All right, maybe we can come back. If you go to the slide that's before this one, there was one other thing I forgot to mention. So in the very middle where there's the left turn arrow, you'll notice that there's a symbol of a bike and that has this kind of pointing. We're adding that as one way to sort of remind bikes where they should go so that they know to turn left onto Gray Street. And then if you go to the very last slide, I wanted to talk about the new signage that's being proposed. So Bob brought up a really great comment about needing to address wayfinding signage because a lot of times bikes, when they come out of the trail, they don't know where they're supposed to go and they get confused. And so what we're proposing to add is some updated wayfinding signage. already today, I think there's some signs that either say D route on them, or they'll say like, they'll have the word letter D with a symbol. And that's something that the city used to do to mark bike routes. We've updated that, and instead of using that system now, we're now using the cool signage that you see that's on the screen in the picture to the right. What that does is it actually has wayfinding on it that's supposed to help with pedestrians and bikes being able to navigate. So we're proposing to add these to 3 different locations, one where the trail crossing comes out on the street, and then another location where there's that intersection where Harlan and Gray and Clear Creek Drive all come together. And then finally at 52nd and Gray. And that this wayfinding signage will hopefully help with that and navigate bikes to where they're supposed to go. Because what we'll add to it is that the Clear Creek Trail is to the left, or to the north if you're coming out of the trail. So hopefully that will help with that.
And Bob, if you still do have a comment, just chime in when you're able to unmute. Just let us know. So we'll keep moving.
No, I think that covers what I had in mind there. That looks pretty good. Yeah, I think that's gonna help a lot there, especially at that intersection.
Great.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. And one of the exciting things about these signs, these are new to Denver. You'll notice that they have a picture of a bear riding a bike. So we're really excited about these signs. So hopefully you all are excited about these new signs as well.
You might see a bear riding a bike on that trail.
I could very well imagine that.
All right, you ready, Riley?
Yep. So another comment that we got during the both when we presented an update to the Inspiration Point R&O meeting, and also relatively recent, or during the public meeting, and then from some of the feedback that we got, was just about the fact that there's missing sidewalks. And so in the long term, we do want to add new sidewalks where we can. We have a limited amount of funding for new sidewalks that's from the Elevate Denver bond program. And right now, where the sidewalks are being prioritized is at near schools and grocery stores. And that's kind of based off of something that was called the Denver Moves Pedestrians Plan. And that was a plan that was done, I think it was in 2017 or 2018, that was done to help the community prioritize where the city should be adding new sidewalks. And as you can imagine, there's a lot on our list that we have to get through, and we're continuing to look for funding for the sidewalk program. So it continues to be documented that this is an important priority, this location for this neighborhood, to have sidewalks in the future. And so we've definitely have heard that and documented that as a priority. In the near term, there is an opportunity for us to expand the shoulder area. I know that a lot of pedestrians use that space to get to the trail and to walk up the hill. So in the near term, there is an opportunity for us to expand that shoulder by moving the center, the yellow line and the white line over a little bit, which would effectively widen that area for people to be able to walk in. There's a sign that's there today that says that pedestrians and bikes kind of share that space. And so that would remain as a part of this. So just kind of wanted to understand some thoughts there. We could also look into if there's a way to sort of protect that little section right there, whether it's just with bollards or posts that would add some additional protection to someone that is walking in that space. So those is something that we can do, at least in the near term, as a part of the pavement project. So I also wanted to pause there too, in case there was any questions or thoughts on that.
Riley, this is Garner again on Harlan. I think that's one, we're going to have a child here soon. And, one of the things we're thinking is one of the best points of living in this area is that green belt right there, the Clear Creek Trail. And there's that's super important to us is it feels like it makes sense, right? Kind of connecting Harlan to the green belt just from a walking perspective.
Right.
It seems like it's just not, I mean, it's workable, but it's not as safe as it feels like it should be. So I think that's a great idea, widening it. And I really liked your idea of putting up some type of rails or what I'm not exactly sure what you mentioned, but something to sort of further, assist with kind of making that a dedicated walking / biking area to get down to Harlan. Because I think you said right now it's supposed to be shared for bikes, but honestly, I'm gonna bike in the middle of the lane because I feel like not in the middle of the, but in the middle of the lane going downhill, because that's the safest place to be for a biker.
That makes sense. And I did learn earlier this week that there is a new pilot program that Dottie will potentially be exploring that kind of would allow for us to do what would basically be called a protected, kind of a protected sidewalk in the near term that would be on the pavement. And the idea behind it is kind of like I mentioned before, where you would add some sort of posts or rail or something that prevents vehicles from going into the shoulder there. That would help kind of formalize that as a place for pedestrians to be in the near term. And this is something that we are looking into doing in places in order to help us be able to add space for pedestrians in the near term, knowing that the sidewalks are a little bit costlier. It might be more in the longer term. I don't have a lot of information on the pilot program because I just learned about that. But that's something that I will also be following up with my team on to see if this location could potentially be a candidate for that.
Riley, another comment we got kind of applies here, having to do with speeds here, and as people, Brian and Gardner mentioned, people speeding up to get to the I think it was, to the interstate as well. So can you talk a little bit about Dottie's approach to speed bumps was one of the questions, and maybe talk about that speed bump pilot program as well?
Yeah, so we are, a couple years ago, the city was not allowed to do speed bumps. It was based on our fire code. However, we recently have updated our guidance based on our some new guidelines, and it's something that we are starting to pilot as a tool. And the technical term for them that's being used is something that's called a speed cushion. And so we're piloting them in a couple of locations just to, one thing, to work with our partners in the fire department to make sure that these that they're comfortable with them, but also working with our other partners at the city. Just since these are new, we want to test these and make sure that they work and can adjust from there. So as that pilot program matures, that is something that will be a tool for us in the future that we can use. There is sometimes we are not able to put them directly on hills. I forget the reason for that, but we can still look into that and kind of, in the kind of midterm. And so happy to look at that as well. The other thing I wanted to mention is if we were to move that, you'll notice that lane that you see where there's the vehicle in it, it's really wide. Anytime that we have a really wide lane, that encourages, we often find that encourages cars to go faster than they should. And so if we were to move that center lane over a little bit, and that would narrow the roadway or narrow that lane, that's something else that is also can be shown as effective to reduce speed. So that's something else that we can do.
Yeah, I like the idea of just widening the that lane on the left, and I think maybe a little bit goes a long way with the protection on that that little lane there, because if I've seen people with walking down there with strollers and walking dogs, and if the lane was the pedestrian lane was a little bit protected, it would probably make drivers be more aware of that too, and go slower.
For sure, absolutely.
One quick thing regarding the protection. I'm actually in Edgewater, but ride up that way a fair bit and do pay taxes in Denver as well. But Edgewater just found something called armadillos, and they're they're plastic guys that we're going to try out on 25th potentially, if you're familiar with like downtown Edgewater. But they're kind of an interesting option and seem a bit more durable than the plastic bollards that you see knocked over all the time. So I'd encourage you to check those out. It might be an interesting solution for this area.
Yeah, that's a great thought. We have actually seen the armadillos. We were going to use them on a street when we were redoing the bike lane on 15th Street in downtown Denver. And then we ended up shifting to a different option, which is using rubber curb stops, which could potentially be an option as well. So something that we can look in. Again, one of the things, because I don't know kind of what the requirements are of that pilot program since we just learned of it, I'm happy to follow up with my colleagues in the engineering side of Dottie and just kind of understand what the options are here and what could apply, or kind of what the criteria is for getting improvements. And then again, I'm happy to follow up. Bob, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, could I make a comment on 52nd?
Sure.
You know, that street there is just getting to be a very, very heavy traffic area. Are they planning on paving that or doing anything with that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So this particular street is sort of complicated because half of it is owned by Denver and then half of it is unincorporated Adams County. We have been working with Adams County on kind of a preliminary design plan to improve 52nd. And what we're hoping to do is to look at find funding to make those improvements in the future and work with Adams County to do that. I don't actually know if the street will be repaved at all, or if our half will be repaved as a part of repaving. That's a good question, and I'm happy to follow up with that one as well.
Yeah, that's a real danger point for crossing. That's going to be a real problem there. I can see that right now. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question too, or maybe a more of a suggestion, because yeah, 52nd, they get a lot of semi trucks and dump trucks because of the materials yard across the way. Has there been any discussion on maybe making this, right where the trail lets out onto 52nd here, because people are coming over onto Gray on opposing traffic, cars are stopped at this stoplight waiting to turn onto 52nd, and people are coming into onto Gray opposing there. Would it be maybe better if you were to make this concrete pad bigger on this side where the trail is, so that people can move over and cross the street into the flow of traffic, onto Gray there? I don't know if I explained myself correctly, but yeah, just thinking if exactly right there where the bikers come out onto Gray Street, across the street, there's cars that have to stop at that stop sign. And so I think it throws off cars sometimes. They get confused. Oh, there's a biker that wants to come straight towards me. So if they were to maybe make this concrete pad a little bigger, so that they can cross going the right way onto Gray, that, I don't know if that would make things safer or less confusing. But yeah, just a thought I had.
Yeah, great suggestion. And that's something I'm happy to follow up with. It's actually CDOT that owns the concrete pad on that side, or I guess they own and operate that section of the trail. And we're working with actually Jefferson County and Adams County for the crossing part of this, but I'm happy to kind of relay that to them just to see if they have plans to improve that in the near term, or if there's any thoughts that they have there.
Shane, I didn't see if that was you, but are you talking about making it bigger by bringing it this direction? That would be what, west, so that they could be directly opposing the the entrance that they're looking at instead of trying to cut two crossings.
Yeah, exactly. Because this north facing lane here that stops at the stop sign
Right.
right there, the bikers have to exit the trail, facing the opposing traffic. So if they were to move over maybe and cross, if you move those crosswalk bars, the paint lines over to the other side where your mouse is, it might be better or safer if the bikers or pedestrians were to cross that way instead of coming onto the traffic,
Cool.
And that's something that we can try to look at again or address even with the pavement markings too. There's sometimes ways that we can mark the pavement to help show bikers where they should be crossing at. And so we can kind of look into that too.
And Riley, Gina had asked about the armadillos and speed cushions with snow plows. Well, maybe Hadar would be a good one to answer this. So Hadar, the question is about what those vertical elements, the things stuck to the pavement, how the snow plows deal with those.
Yeah, I know as far as the speed cushions go, that is one of the reasons that it's in the pilot program, to see how the plows are able to work around the speed cushions. We have like the smaller plows that go into the bike lanes. I am not very well versed on the speed cushion pilot program. Do you know more about that, Riley?
Just that it's something that is being piloted for a year or two. I'm not really sure the exact length of it, that we are going to test these things. We're working with our fire department as well as with our maintenance crews and our snowplow crews to understand the implications to them. I know that there's other cities that receive a lot of snow that do have speed cushions, and there's certainly learning lessons that we can use from them as well. And it also depends on the type of snowplow. So on our local streets, or the really kind of more residential streets, we typically use a different plowing equipment than we would on a busier street. So on the busier street, it's those large kind of semis, or almost snowplows that look like dump trucks almost. And there may be differences of what can be used by those in comparison to another. I think something that I've heard that places sometimes will do is they'll have some sort of marker, like a yellow marker next to a speed cushion, that alerts a snowplow driver that they need to lift up their snowplow in that little section. So certainly something that we're going to be learning from, and part of, as you said, part of why we're looking into it as a pilot.
And I would add that, say, the armadillos are probably similar to what the rubber curb stops that are shown in the picture up here too. Although they're intermittent instead of continuous, it's an added maintenance cost, but Denver is figuring out how to make it work. So. Okay, I think we're caught up on questions. I don't see any other hands. Maybe Riley, we can go through here to kind of finish it out.
Yep, sounds good.
We already did our questions, so I don't think we're going to stop for that one.
Perfect. So just kind of in terms of next steps, we do have information about the project that will be on our website. So we try to keep that regularly updated. And that is on bit.ly/Denver bike paving. And Alicia, if you don't mind typing that into the chat, just so that people have that as well. And that site will have any updates on this particular project. When you do go to that page, just make sure to click Harlan Gray, so that way you'll see the latest updates. There will also be a recording of this meeting that will be posted hopefully either tomorrow or early next week. So if any of your neighbors miss this meeting tonight, you'll be able to share the recording with them and encourage them to be able to provide us with more feedback as well. And then just in terms of repaving, one of the things I wanted to mention is I don't know the exact date or month or anything when the streets are planning to be repaved, but something that the city does is prior to repaving a street is we will go out and flyer all of the houses that are adjacent to those to the street that's being repaved. And we usually do that a week in advance so that we know that the repaving is happening. If there's any other questions or feedback, we're also happy to take that at the bikes@denvergov.org site. Something that's helpful is just to make sure that you include the Harlan Gray Street project. I know it says bike lanes in the subject line. It will not be bike lane anymore, but if you just say Harlan Gray Street project in the subject line, that just helps us to make sure that that email gets directed to the right person. And then something else that's set up is because we realize that not everyone has access to technology, is we also do have a hotline number set up that's 303-223-6575. That allows us to know, or that allows you to leave, or your neighbors to leave a message, and we will try to give whoever calls that number a call back. And then there is a way to, if you want to join our email list, you can also put your email in the chat or visit our website and just to sign up for updates. And I did see a question from Councilwoman Sandoval that just said if we can let your office know when the paving is about to start. And so we will certainly keep you updated when we find out for ourselves when the street's planned for repaving. And then on the next slide here, I just wanted to mention, I know that there's a lot of different ways that we get a lot of different requests at the city, and sometimes we get requests for new signals, sometimes we get requests for sidewalks and all kinds of different improvements. And so this one, where we're talking about tonight, just as a reminder, what's triggering these improvements and the ability to be able to do them is the fact that the street's being repaved, but that doesn't mean that if there is a request to say add a new signal somewhere or that kind of thing, that we have forgotten about that. All of those kinds of requests and the feedback that we get is important. I just kind of wanted to just share in case there was any questions about why we were focused on the paving portion of it. And then on the next slide, one of the things that we're trying to do as we kind of work to go back to either doing a hybrid of virtual meetings or in-person meetings, we're constantly trying to improve how we're doing public outreach. So we do have a survey that's at bit.ly/gray meeting survey. And again, if you can just put that, or I see Alicia has already put that in the chat, so thank you so much. What this doesn't ask questions about the project itself, but it just asks how we can continue as a city and as a department to improve our public outreach process and continue to improve these meetings so that way we can better serve you as the residents of Denver. If there's any other questions or thoughts, I'm happy to take those now before we conclude for the evening.
A comment from Councilwoman Sandoval's office too about signing up for her newsletter. So there's a link in there as well.
Great.
I just had to slide that in there.
Of course.
we will share updates as we have them, but not everybody follows us on social media. Our newsletter is once a month, so I promise we won't annoy you. And if we do, then you can unsubscribe. But we really are trying to get the word out on community activities, and the only way for you to know about them is to actually follow us. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Gina. And one last note on this survey here, it's really quick. I mean, it shouldn't take you even 5 minutes, so please do it now. If I were in person, I'd be tossing candy to whoever was willing to take the survey, but I can't really do that. We just beg to get that done, so thank you.
Virtual candy instead.
Right.
We have ourselves scheduled till 7:30. However, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we're happy to, if there are no additional questions or thoughts, I'm happy to end a little bit early so that everyone can go out and enjoy the remaining sunshine this evening. So we did want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy evenings to join us. We really do appreciate your feedback and value it. So again, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amanda, thank you for your help. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too.